Hey guys, we're gonna go through these the other half of these transcripts from Justin Baldoni's depositions, the ones that have been released so far. So we went through like 100 some pages the other night, and tonight there's also 100 some pages, but there's some duplicate stuff in there, so I was able to cross some stuff out. I went through and hopefully we can take a chunk out of that and it won't take as long. I cursed myself last time by saying I wasn't going to go for 3 hours, and then I almost did. So we'll try not to do that. If you saw that comment I made before we started here, when I started streaming on Twitch, which is mostly for gaming to my understanding, but I wanted to have a backup because you never know when you're going to get struck on YouTube or something like that because people will abuse reports, especially if people like target you with reports, which there are certain subreddits and stuff that will do that. So I want to have a backup. So if you have a Twitch account or if you want to make a Twitch account for free, you can, and you can find me here. Let's see. It's the same username, Lethal Lauren 904. It's just I started out gaming. You can see some clips there that they're very old now. They're like a couple years old and they're kind of lame, but it is what it is. So that would be my backup channel. And it's a little hard to keep up with multiple platforms at once as far as like reading the comments and stuff like that, but I'll do my best. We'll see how it goes. And then I'll have to learn to start streaming to like TikTok or whatever, but I don't know how to do that yet, so we're not going to worry about it tonight. Give me 1 second here, guys. Okay. All right. Making sure everything's working here. Let me pull up this deposition. There we go. All right. So the reason I wanted to kind of focus on using this portion of the deposition where Blake's attorneys are talking about his past abuse, Justin's past abuse from his former partner, where he previously said he was sexually harassed by someone and experiences that he shared, is because I saw this article from People that came out and I thought it was pretty shitty. And I saw the headlines that were going around the weekend. Let's just look this up and I'll show you. Okay. So all you have to do is look at Google to know how this was going over the weekend. And, Blake's team always likes to make a press play on Friday afternoons. They waited until Friday, that's supposed to be deadline, to try to, delay the public being able to see the stuff that she's put forth in her motions. It's heavily redacted, and she got another extension until early January, which is unfortunate. But so the headlines over the weekend, though, they played for a 10th sanctions motion here. This time against the lawyers for stuff that happened in the depositions where both sides of the ball here are playing things kind of snappy. They're getting kind of aggressive. That happens sometimes, in my understanding, in these types of things. This is like heavily contentious. This case is obviously heavily contentious. And so Blake's lawyers will be really rude. And then Justin's lawyer will, like, in turn, respond in kind of a sarcastic way. But then her attorneys are the only people who run to the judge and the public docket to kind of cry about these things and say, oh my God, this other side is so terrible, because they're trying very hard to play this victim aspect for Blake. My 9 minutes, yeah. If you saw that, Cassidy and I read the deposition transcript that they put forth with that motion from the deposition of Jamie Heath, where Blake's attorney, Ezra Hudson, was actually acting like a psycho bitch. So I'm not really sure how that helped their case, but and then they put out this letter that said, you're not allowed to ask about Blake's past relationships or, sexual history or whatever because of rape shield laws, which I guess rape shield laws technically do extend to victims of sexual harassment. But the problem a lot of people have with that is Blake Lively's not making a convincing legal case for sexual harassment here. And I'm not talking about like he said something she didn't like or made her uncomfortable in some way. I'm talking about legal sexual harassment. What actually meets the threshold for sexual harassment under the law? She's not making a good case for that right now, in my opinion. So they, though, came out with this letter in the sanctions motion, and it says that they're slamming, his attorneys for asking about her sexual history or whatever. But the thing is, they're saying that happened in, I guess, her deposition, where the sanctions motion is actually relevant to an expert's deposition that happened last Monday. So her deposition happened months ago now, and they're trying to throw this ball out there right before the weekend to get the press hanging on it. And of course, the mainstream media, the legacy media, will run with it. And not question it. And also, they all feed off of each other. So Variety, from what my understanding, was one of the first ones to put this out. And they made it sound like Blake's attorneys were asking for sanctions over Blake being questioned about her sexual history in her deposition. No, they were asking for sanctions based on something ridiculous, in my opinion, which was like some kind of dispute they were having during an expert deposition months after Blake's. But Variety ran with these headlines and made it sound like this was related to Blake's deposition, and that Justin's attorneys were just now starting to question her sexual history. Neither of those things is true. And a lot of the lawyers who look at this case and follow it closely have said the same thing. Neither of those things is true. But of course, we see these headlines from these legacy media outlets. They just copy and paste each other. They don't actually read anything or look into anything for themselves. And that's why people don't really trust this stuff anymore, because when the first one gets it wrong, they all get it wrong. Nobody cares about independent thought. They don't care to read into it further. They don't care to get better information or do anything unique that would make you worthy of being called a reporter rather than someone who just copy edits. But of course, they're trying to now say that her deposition was like, she was overrun by these discriminatory, harassing things because she's being asked about her sexual history. Now, we know that Blake's allegations are quite exaggerated from what we've seen so far. So they didn't actually happen to give any sort of example or evidence of what they used to describe, her sexual history or background or whatever that's supposedly protected by rape shield laws. They didn't happen to put forth anything that would back that up, of course. They just make the allegation and the media runs with it. And of course, the Wayfair parties have not had a chance to respond to this yet, or they haven't responded to it yet. They'll have a chance. And so they can't really, they haven't had any defense of that. The press just runs with it. They have no idea what was actually said or what actually happened there. They don't mention that it's actually not relevant to the issue at hand or the next sanctions motion at all. It's just messy. It's so messy. So, all right. Let me make sure everything's good and working here. Yep, we're good. Lily White, thank you for watching over on Twitch. And Pandora Fox also. Appreciate you. All right. So we pull up these deposition transcripts. Like I said, I redlined out some pages towards the bottom, so it's going to be shorter than it looks right now. We'll try not to go for 3 hours again, but yeah. Give me 1 second. Nag is now annoyed. She knows they are lying. Yeah, so not actually Golden is one of the lawyers who covers this case, primarily on TikTok, but she does have a YouTube account now. A lot of the lawyers over there who cover this stuff are now moving over to YouTube as well. They use both, so she's pretty good. I mean, as far as I can tell, she's excellent at her job. So, and gives very good insights. Also, a little girl attorney. There's Brit's cool. Brit's cool. Who else? I'm sure I'm missing some others. I'm not sure, right now if I could name everybody, but they're all cool. And, I've seen, I don't pay much mind to TikTok or honestly any other platform other than YouTube. It's just too hard to keep up with everything because I have a full-time job on top of that. So I gotta, and some people can do it, but I can't. I can't keep up with all that and also have a life. So TikTok, though, I've seen, one of the other like lively type people, pro lively type people on TikTok was posting pictures of one of the attorneys' families, not the attorneys involved in the case, but I guess little girl attorney came out and made a statement about this, so I can say that. They were, talking about her, saying that she's not being transparent, needs to disclose things because of her, religious background. As we know, Justin and a lot of Wayfair subscribe to the Baha'i faith. I'm not like a super religious person, but I don't judge anyone based on their religious beliefs or their culture or their faith or anything like that. I think everybody's free to kind of do what they want. I have no negative thoughts about it. And then kind of linking her to the Wayfair parties based on her religion. And because they had at some point been in the same room or something, and like looking at her family's photos on social media, her innocent family who is not involved in this at all or doesn't even comment on it. Like posting photos of them on TikTok. And I was just like, you guys are fucking crazy. Like if you're going out of your way to try to discredit a creator that you don't agree with online by stalking their family and like putting their family out there and encouraging your followers who don't like this person to send hate to their innocent family, like, you're not well, in my opinion. Like, it's fine for me. Like, I know that there are people out there who like really believe Blake Lively's story or are very adamantly like believe the woman no matter what. And like, I can't police those people's thoughts. I can't tell them what to do. I can only tell people what I think. I can tell you that I have at least a friend or two who have kind of fallen onto the Blake Lively side of this lawsuit, and that doesn't affect those relationships whatsoever. If you have like healthy relationships, you can handle disagreement. And if you have like a really, you know, like healthy distance from things to the point where you can handle those kinds of disagreements and handle other people having different perspectives, I think that's a good way to go. It's never, you know, like good to be so latched onto something that you would spew hatred at people you used to like or something like that because you're on different sides of an argument about like a celebrity court case. You know what I mean? And I understand it's much bigger than that to a lot of us, but I just, I don't agree with attacking people just because they disagree with your point of view. So this is not something I would ever do if that were the case, right? So like there are creators who are very pro-Lively who like, I don't mind that. I don't mind that they have their opinions because I come from a place where I believe everybody has good intentions for the most part, right? Not everybody, but everybody for the most part. And so I believe that when people are like very adamantly going at this from like a pro Blake perspective, I think it comes from a place of wanting to believe victims. I think it comes from a place of maybe they have some experiences that are affecting their point of view on this. And I think that I strongly disagree with them, but I believe that sometimes you can be very on different sides of arguments, like very strongly, but still recognize that somebody else has a good heart or they're coming from a good place. You know what I mean? And so I just can't imagine going to somebody who's like a pro-Lively creator or something and being like, well, I saw pictures of your dad on the internet and like showing them to my following and being like, look at what this person's dad posted on Facebook and like inspiring hatred going towards that person's family. Like, that's so fucking crazy to me. That's mostly why I don't mess with other platforms a lot. It's hard enough to manage one, but having that kind of hatred coming from people just for disagreeing on a celebrity court case, right, is fucking wild. Not to mention half of what these people say are just like not true. I'm like, first of all, don't bring people's family into it. Second, what you're saying is intentionally dishonest. So, but I just wanted to say that like a lot of the lawyers that I see cover this case on TikTok and stuff, I think they're good people, good quality people. And I don't think they deserve the kind of hatred that they've been getting and the kind of negativity and the kind of people encouraging others to question their credibility as like an attorney giving an opinion based on their experience just because of their religion and such. You know what I mean? So, all right, why don't we just get into this deposition here? And guys, just know that I will be talking a lot. I like to warn people. So if you're new here, you know, if you're new here, just know that I'll put out like a short video, a short version of this stuff, where I'll go over like 5 big things from these deposition transcripts. And so if you can't sit here and like listen to this, or if it annoys you that I'm talking so much, then you can wait for that, or you can watch a different channel. I think that some people sometimes in comments, and I usually just remove them because I'm like, this is not normal. Some people sometimes in comments show that they're like, their mental health is being impacted by how much attention they're paying. And they're just like, oh my God, what you're doing is like, my talking too much is like making them so angry that they get so mad and upset. And they're just like, you have to do this and this and that. I'm like, no, I think that you should see a therapist about why you're spending so much time trying to control other people and listening to things that frustrate you. And B, go watch someone else. Honestly, I don't even need to know about it. You don't even have to tell me. So, all right, let's get into it. So, like I said, these are the pages that we haven't gone over yet. There's going to be some stuff that I can skim over because it's like stuff that we covered last time, or it's repeated stuff from the top to the bottom. But they're asking about him using Signal, which we know Signal has come up a lot in this lawsuit. They're using Signal messages to try to say that the Wayfair parties basically deleted evidence. So here he's just saying that he, uses Signal since the lawsuits were filed to talk to his attorneys, people that are the defendants, and some friends. They talk about voice notes, which is something else they've been accused of deleting. There's no evidence of that really, but that's what they've been accused of. Do you ever record phone calls that, and I have to make sure that the pages are continuous, right? Because sometimes it cuts off, that you're a participant in? Justin says, I certainly have from time to time. Do you do that frequently? No. Did you ever record any phone calls or Zooms with the participants in this case? In which case exactly? Either the Blake Lively case or the Stephanie Jones case? Yes. How many times would you estimate? He says 2 to 4, maybe 4 times, maybe might be 3. So he's not sure. And that's not abnormal to not remember. You know what I mean? So, all right. Am I correct to understand that's 4 times ever that you recorded phone calls or Zooms with any of the participants or witness or people involved in the events that underlie either of these litigations? He says, I don't do it often, so I imagine it was around 4, 2 to 4. I'd have to take a lot of pausing to really think about that, which I think it's between 2 and 4. Why don't we say 4? How about in-person meetings? Okay. Justin says 1 that I can think of. So, and I'll just kind of paraphrase this for you. So he said that they recorded 1 session, a meeting which was technically in person with Jenny Slate. So it was improv acting between Justin, Jenny Slate, and Blake Lively. Justin and Jenny Slate were together in New Jersey, and Lively must have been remote because she was at her house in New York. So he recorded that session. Okay. Other than that 1 in-person meeting, can you think of any other in-person meetings that you recorded that have involved any of the participants in the events underlying these cases or had anything to do with the events underlying these cases? He says, at the moment, I can't. Are you aware that your counsel produced to us last night 4 recordings, and Ms. Shapiro, his attorney, says, objection to the extent it calls for information provided by your attorneys. And Blake, in the very limited stuff that we've seen, has also, we've seen them object on the same grounds. So I guess this is kind of a common thing. I've never seen deposition transcripts like this before, so this is kind of new to me, but it makes sense. Like, you're not supposed to testify to things that you only know because your attorneys told you so, right? Let's see. Okay. Are you aware they were produced last night? So she says, the attorney for Blake says that these, or I think it was actually Mike Gottlieb doing the questioning here. So it would have been Mike, a male. Are you aware that they produced 4 recordings to us? And then Justin says, I would imagine they would. Directing you not to answer anything to the extent it calls for information you'll learn from your attorney. So Justin says, I can't answer. All right. Are you going to follow your counsel's instructions? Yes, ma'am. Make sure the page is continuing. Yep. Do you recall recording a phone call between you and any of the following? Angie Giannetti, Josh Greenstein, or Todd Black? He says, Angie Giannetti. I don't know if Todd Black was on it, but I know Angie, yeah. Tell me what you recall about that phone call with Angie. I haven't listened to them. What I recall is feeling almost like, and feeling scared and almost feeling like what was happening was like I needed a witness, because what was happening was just it felt kind of crazy. But I don't remember the content of the call. I assume it had to do with figuring out how to get through a difficult shoot. What was it at the time that felt kind of crazy to you? He says, I don't know exactly what call or when it was recorded, so I don't know if I can answer that without more details. Okay. Do you remember why you recorded that call? He said, again, I just needed to know what call you're referring to. Do you have memory of a call that you recorded with Angie Giannetti? He says, I have a vague memory. Yes. 1 second here, guys. All right. With respect to that call, do you have a vague memory do you have any recollection of why you recorded that call? He says, I think I felt powerless and scared and kind of lonely. What did you intend to do with that recording? He says, nothing. I didn't know if I would ever need it one day. Have you needed it? He says, I haven't looked at it or listened to it, so apparently not. Did you tell her that you were recording the call? He says, I didn't. Where were you located when you recorded the call? Justin says, I don't know. I would have to know the date on the recording, and then I could try to reverse engineer it. Okay. Question, from your vague memory of doing this, give me your best estimate of where you were located. Justin says, I honestly don't know. Is it possible that you were in California? He says, it's possible. Where was Angie located when you recorded that call? He says, I assume she was in California. Okay. So asking about the recordings, let's go back to that recording of Steve Sarwich that Blake Lively has used from Claire Ayub. So Steve, I don't remember where Claire was at the time, but Steve was in, I believe, Illinois. And so people, and myself included, we're wondering, like, is that a problem because of the, consent laws? Because here in Florida, where I live, it's a two-party consent state. So both parties have to consent to you recording the call. However, and I don't know if this applies everywhere or if this just applies here or I don't know. Again, different rules are in place when it comes to business calls, I guess. And that's where I'm kind of like, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really speak to that. So I haven't really harped on this issue so much with the Claire recording as to whether or not it was an illegal recording, because I don't know what the rules are surrounding business calls. There are rules in place in a lot of states where both people have to consent to personal calls. I don't know about business. So I don't know if that applies here at all either. He's saying it's possible he was in California. He's assuming Angie was in California. So it's possible that they were both in California, which I think, and somebody who lives in California and chat, oh, there you go. California is a two-party state. Right. So I think it's possible that they're trying to say he illegally recorded that maybe. But again, like I said with the Claire thing, I don't know if that's necessarily true, because if it was a work-related call, a business call only, I think there are different rules that apply. But I don't know because that varies by state. So, all right. Anyways, do you have a memory of recording any calls with Josh Greenstein? He says no. Any calls with Todd Black? Only if Todd were on a call with Angie. Right. Said Todd is often in New York. He lives in LA, but he's often shooting movies. Okay. All right. And then, yeah, we skipped a page here. So I don't know what the context was that preceded this, but let's see. Other than one call we've spoken about with Angie Giannetti, do you recall recording any other calls? He says, yes. I recorded part of a call with Sean Levy. Who is Sean Levy? Sean Levy is a director and apparently a very close friend of Miss Lively and Mr. Reynolds. He says, or the lawyer says, what do you recall about that call? Justin says, I recall he wanted to speak to me. And as we began talking, I got the feeling that he was calling to kind of adjust or course correct, which made me feel a little uncomfortable. Adjust or course correct from what? I didn't know. What do you mean when you say adjust or course correct? Just explain that to me a little bit more, please. Justin says it felt like he was being asked to call me, like he wasn't just calling to talk or check in. Okay. What was he calling you about? The movie, It Ends With Us, and Miss Lively. Was he calling you about the tensions that were arising in relation to the movie? Justin says no. So what about the movie It Ends With Us was he calling you about? Justin says he was calling to give me advice, it appeared, on how to handle or navigate making a movie with Miss Lively. When in time was this? Justin says I could be wrong, but I believe it was April 2023. Where were you located when you recorded the call? At my office in New Jersey. Where was he located when he was speaking to you on the call? I don't know. Did you inform him that you were recording the call? I did not. Other than these two calls we've now spoken about, one with Angie and one with Sean, can you remember any other phone calls you recorded? Justin says it's not something I do often, so no, to be precise. I can't. Okay. Does Jamie Heath often record phone calls to your understanding? Justin says, I'm unaware of what Jamie does on his own time. Does Jamie Heath ever record phone calls in the course of his work for Wayfair to your understanding? Justin says, I don't know. I know he has, but I don't know if it's a regular practice. How do you know he has? Because I'm aware of at least a recording. And Justin says that's the recording of a WME agent or a conversation that happened. Okay. And I think it skips some pages ahead here. So I'm going to read some of this, but it's like without the context of everything that happened before it, it's kind of weird as to like why we're talking about this, but I will go ahead and read this part. So give me one sec. Okay. And so he's asking him basically about like when Wayfair Studios started and the kind of people who have been promised equity in Wayfair. Justin is talking about Ahmed, who was his former partner. And I just wanted to go over this because he talks a little bit about Wayfair and the people that started it. So he says, I'll start with Ahmed, who's my former partner, which was a small production company that had started years ago. So Wayfair Entertainment is not the same as Wayfair Studios, but he started this small production company called Wayfair Entertainment. And he's an independent producer now. But I didn't feel like I could have started Wayfair without his help through Wayfair Entertainment. So I gave him a small piece of my own equity. So Justin's saying this person, it was his former partner at Wayfair Entertainment, and he felt like he couldn't have started Wayfair Studios without Ahmed's help with Wayfair Entertainment, the little bit smaller production company. And so he gave Ahmed some equity in Wayfair Studios. Right. Jamie Heath took a low salary compared probably to a lot of other folks and has lived and breathed the company. And Steve and I felt he deserved a small piece of equity. So Jamie took a lower pay than he could or should have in order to help the company succeed. Right. And so he felt like Jamie deserves some equity in the company. Right. And I'm still unsure if Tara Hanks officially has or had any of that, or if it was promised. But when she joined, I think it was discussed, but I don't have a full memory of it. Would you say it's accurate that you and Steve co-founded Wayfair Studios? He says, yeah, I think so. All right. And then he's talking about how Wayfair Studios started. It says, I had always wanted to have the means to create movies that I thought I could make a difference and help people. And Steve had a very similar worldview and wanted to make movies that could help people too. So we started Wayfair. And then they ask, how did you come to know Steve Sarwitz? Justin says, I first met Steve when he was making a film called The Gates. It was a story of the Bob. I don't know if I'm saying that right or pronouncing that right, and I apologize. The Bob, who was a central figure in the Baha'i faith. And we were introduced because he said he didn't know what he was doing and he needed some guidance. And so I helped him out and we became friends and we have a shared faith. Okay, so I just wanted to give some background on that because I thought that what he said about the people that he started his company with and the way that even Jamie was willing to take lower pay just to make sure they had a successful company. I thought that was kind of a nice insight. I cut out some of this stuff because we've already seen it, or it's not really that important to what's at hand without the context that preceded it. So, okay. So they're talking about another guy who used to work with them. His name is Labid. Okay. He's saying, he's talking about Labid and why he didn't always feel Labid was a good person to work with, didn't feel he operated with integrity. They ask him to give examples. Justin says, the one I can think of right now is my dad, Sam, is also in the entertainment business. And I know who Sam is because of their podcast. And I know that Sam and Justin did an episode of their podcast, which was just really moving and beautiful. And I think everyone should watch it. It was a really good watch. So Sam seems like a good guy. He was one of the founding fathers of what is called product placement. And I always wanted to work with my dad, and it's a sweet relationship. But I remember my dad told me that he had promised Labid, or Labid had promised him, that he could build out an entire product placement division of Wayfair Studios, and that he would put him on a salary. And I think he got my dad's hopes up, which my dad, was 70, and that wasn't ever part. And then it cuts off there, so I'm not really sure what else it says. But I wanted to point this out because, how Blake marketed her... hair care and alcohol lines when she was promoting the film. And that was a big issue for a lot of people. We've had some people on the, lively side of things who believe Blake's side, who say well, Justin's father was advertising a certain beer within a scene that was in a bar. I'm no, product placement in a movie is quite a different thing than advertising your own business interests when promoting a domestic violence film, especially when that business interest is alcohol, which is a big contributor in domestic violence relationships with people, primarily men, they drink in these kind of, I'm not saying all men do this, especially when they, I know lots of guys who drink and don't do this, obviously, like my brother, for example, or my dad. But I'm talking about within relationships where there is domestic violence. So within this subset of people, alcohol is often a factor. So the men who end up with this violent predisposition, who end up hurting their wives or hurting their families or beating people, a lot of times alcohol is involved. So people had a problem with her marketing her alcohol brand, right? But this scene in the movie, it was a scene in a bar. And so there was a product placement of a certain type of beer in the bar. They were shooting a bar scene. That's entirely fucking different. People really bend and stretch to try to make a thing out of nothing. So, all right, let me get a sip real quick. Okay. So we're moving on to a different section because a lot of pages were cut out here. So it says text messages with Blake. No text messages with Stephanie Jones. Justin says, I don't believe I shared any of those with Mitz. And I can't remember who Mitz is. If anyone in the chat can, let me know. But they're asking about what he shared with Mitz. Okay. Text messages with Jen Abel. No. Text messages with Melissa Nathan. I didn't have any text messages with Melissa Nathan. Okay. Text messages with whom then? So he's saying my memory, text messages with my health coach, and text messages with Don Saladino. Sorry. And they're asking, who is your health coach? Jennifer Benson. What does she generally do for you? She's not my current health coach. What should she generally do for you when she was your health coach? He said she tried to keep me healthy, which is a pretty obvious answer, dude. I mean, I think it's a pretty easy one to figure out. Okay, Mitz is VP of Operations at Wayfair. Okay, so he's sharing screenshots with the Vice President of Operations at his company, which is not hard to see why he would do that. All right. How? Supplements, peptides, helping my immune system. Let's see. What about your text messages with your health coach did you believe at the time would help you explain the truth of what happened? So they're like basically saying, why did you share this? Why did you think these texts with your health coach would help you be believed based on these allegations? Justin says, if my memory is correct, I was being accused of many things, but one of them was putting Miss Lively on a phone call with a dietitian, which was a lie and an extreme distortion of the truth. Who is Don Saladino? He's a personal trainer. Is he Miss Lively's personal trainer? Justin says, I would assume so. I mean, I think he knows the answer to that, so I'm not really sure why he said I would assume so. But, and what about your text messages with him did you believe at the time would help you demonstrate the truth of what had happened? He says the communications between him and myself that showed that he was also working with me. So Don wasn't just Miss Lively's personal trainer. He was Justin's personal trainer. And he broke Justin's, confidence, his privacy when he went to Blake and said, oh my God, guess what Justin said about you behind your back? Guess what he asked? Like, John sounds like a little shit stirrer. And I would not trust him to be anyone I worked with because he's not bound by HIPAA, apparently, and he doesn't mind sharing what his clients say with other clients who work together. So that's a problem. Right. The communication between him and myself that showed he was also working with me. How many screenshots do you recall sending to Mitz? He says, I don't know what exactly he says because it cuts off here. So, are you aware that Wayfair and you decided to hire Melissa Nathan over Stephanie Jones' objections? He said, I would imagine so, yes. Is this the text message you were referring to that Stephanie Jones sent you where she warned you against hiring Melissa Nathan? It appears to be. And I remember reading that text recently in these documents, but I can't remember exactly what it said word for word. I just know Stephanie, I guess, basically warned against it, but they were having a very rocky relationship with Stephanie. Stephanie was having a very rocky relationship with all of her employees, apparently, at JonesWorks. It was just a messy time. So maybe taking the lady's word for it just wasn't going to work at that point in time. I don't fault them for that. So, like, if somebody who is like somebody you work with or who works for you is not acting well, as we've kind of gathered from their documents in the Jones case, and even in this case, Stephanie Jones was apparently not acting within her like normal right mind. She seemed manic. She was, calling people at weird times, trying to get people to, prove that they were sick or at a funeral and shit like that. Bringing her psychic into work, telling people with fertility problems that they were going to get pregnant with twins. Like, it's just crazy stuff she was doing. So I think it's okay for them to question her judgment when she says, don't hire Melissa Nathan. So they made their own decision anyways, based on the expertise of the person they had been working with the most throughout that time. Also, it's ultimately up to the client what they want to do. Your publicist, can't really force you not to hire someone, I don't think, to my knowledge, but that's just my understanding of how the business works. I think the client still gets to make their own decisions. Ultimately, it's up to the client what they want. So, all right. They ask about the scenario planning document here. He says he only saw one version. He never saw a second version. Okay. At some point after you received the scenario planning document for TAG, you ultimately hired TAG. He says the company did. Yes. Okay. Did you also have an understanding of whether you personally also hired TAG? So that would be TAG not just representing Wayfair and the movie, but also representing Justin Baldoni, the individual. He says, I don't think I personally hired anyone. Okay. And when Wayfair hired TAG, what was your understanding of what TAG was being brought on to do? My understanding was that TAG was being brought on to be a crisis public relations representative. Was, to your understanding, TAG given any instructions by you or by Wayfair in terms of how to proceed once you had hired them? He says, I believe so. I believe that Jamie was in communication with them. And do you know what those instructions were? Justin says, I can only speak to the instructions I gave Jamie or at any time spoke to Jen or on the calls, which was to plan and just try to get good press out there for the movie. Okay. How involved were you personally in discussing with anyone at TAG the type of PR strategy you should be employing? Justin says, I don't know. I think I had ideas. I'm not sure how many conversations were happening versus what ideas I was sharing. I was kind of in and out. Okay. Do you have any recollection of any ideas you had that you shared with TAG? Justin says, I mean, I really wanted to focus, not just TAG, but also Jen. I really wanted to focus on amplifying the voices of survivors. I wanted to focus on the DV. I wanted to focus on the movie and not all of this speculation and drama. The lawyer asked, did you personally ever have any conversations with Stephanie Jones about the instructions that Wayfair was giving TAG in terms of how to proceed? Justin says, I don't think I had any real conversations with Stephanie Jones outside of texting through July and August. Okay. Do you recall ever communicating with Stephanie Jones, whether on text or in conversation, about the instructions that Wayfair had given TAG about how to proceed? Justin says, I don't believe so. My memory of text with Stephanie were focused on letting her, and then it cuts off again. So I'm not really sure what happened there. All right. Give me 1 second, guys. Okay. And we're moving on to another section here, like I said, because the page is cut off. So is this the idea from your partner, Steve Sarwitz, about flipping the narrative that you were just discussing flipping the narrative about? Justin says, can I have a second to read it? So is this the substance of the idea you were just talking about? Okay, about flipping the script. Yes. And then the question is, and that included flipping the script from Ryan saying script was a disaster and he saved the movie to something about Ryan claiming the female hired was a feminist writer, didn't know how to tackle a female film, etc. Justin says he saw that, yes. This idea that this was a female writer and a female film, and that what Ryan Reynolds was saying was essentially misogynistic, did that come from Steve? Okay, well, does it matter if it came from Steve, if it's true? Or if it's their genuine opinion? Like we know Ryan Reynolds was excused from a lot of things because he could have genuinely believed that, Justin Baldoni was a predator, as he said. And so, that prevented the actual malice component of defamation. But this here, like, if they were saying that Ryan was acting misogynistic, the same should also apply there, right? So, give me 1 second. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to operate this multi-stream. Okay. I think I said here that my partner Steve had asked about this, so I was passing that along. Okay. So this idea, something about Ryan claiming the female hired was a feminist writer, didn't know how to tackle a female film, came from Steve. Justin says that was what was passed on to me. Did you use any judgment about whether or not that was a good idea before you pass it along? Justin says, I think it's implied in him saying the script was a disaster, so I just pass it along. I didn't disagree with him. You didn't disagree with Mr. Sarowitz's idea. Is that what you mean? Justin says, I didn't disagree with what Mr. Sarwitz was saying in terms of what Ryan was inferring when he called the script a disaster. Okay. So the question here from the lawyer says, meaning that Ryan was essentially acting, and they cut it off. They always cut it off when it gets to good parts. Okay. All right. Other than the reporting that was going on at the time about what Mr. Reynolds or Miss Lively had said about this, do you have any other basis to understand what they had actually said? Okay. And they're still talking about something in the scenario planning and the flipping the script. I don't really know what it is because they unfortunately cut off the pages. So, all right. He says, I'm not sure. Okay. Was this also part of the scenario planning you were discussing? I'm unsure. How does flipping the narrative in the way that's suggested here reconcile with the view that you should be putting out only positive stories? Justin says, because it has to do with a defensive measure. So if we're talking about something that was an offensive measure, then flipping an existing narrative would not be us doing anything offensively. It would be us defending. And again, this was me passing something on. All right. Question is, do you recall testifying earlier about whether Melissa Nathan ever encouraged you to leave JonesWorks with Jen Abel when Jen Abel left? Justin says, at this point, I remember some of that, and I would love for you to refresh my memory more. And then, of course, they cut it off. So Page 296 here is talking about Stephanie Jones. And Justin's answering a question here where they cut off the beginning, but it says, I think she represented The Rock, and she, Stephanie, from context clues, had said on that call that Mr. Reynolds had like terrorized The Rock or something to that extent. So basically saying Mr. Reynolds terrorized Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Something about a letter. I don't remember the details, but something about he had written a letter and it was like they wouldn't do press together. So I guess The Rock and Ryan Reynolds at some point had decided they would not do press together. It was a lot of gossip, but that's why I remember laughing, because I was just like, oh. The question is, do you feel supported by her on that call? Justin says, yeah, as I said earlier, it kind of felt like an, oh, don't worry. She's this and that. It will be fine. The movie's going to come out and it will be awesome. And everybody's had a bad experience with her. It was like that kind of call. So Stephanie Jones, from what Justin is saying here, was just saying here, was saying, don't worry about it. Like Ryan and Blake have had problems with lots of people and it'll end up fine. Lots of people had bad experiences with them. It's not going to be a big deal. So that's kind of what she was giving Justin at that point. And did you feel like she believed what you were relaying to her about your experiences on set? Justin says, yes. I don't remember sharing much, but what I did share, I just shared the truth. And she, yeah. Okay. What do you remember sharing with her about your experiences on set? So this actually interesting and is interesting here because it makes me think that maybe he was talking about someone else other than Stephanie, but then it says she represented The Rock. So I'm like, it has to have been Stephanie then, because Stephanie Jones just brought up in her documents in her case that she represented The Rock. That she believes The Rock was behind the smear websites against her now, which is interesting. So, okay. I specifically remember sharing the situation with our trainer and asking him about what he thought Miss Lively might weigh when we shot the scene where I had to pick her up because of my back. And how then they confronted me the next day, and how this trainer evidently then went and told her that I was asking about her weight or something, and then how that became this big thing, and they sat me down, and I just remember her kind of not being able to believe that this was even a thing. I believe I shared with her that I had made a comment about the way Jenny Slate looked in her wardrobe, and then I used the word sexy, and I think she started responding by joking about how, again, I don't want to, if it's okay, repeat the words that she said, but generalizing the women and their fragility. So he's saying that Stephanie Jones, again, I'm 99% sure that's who he's talking about here from context clues, was talking about how fragile the women were in response to like what he was saying, like, why would they complain about that? That's so fragile. So that's what he's saying here. Justin continues. And then I talked about the wardrobe, how hard it was with the wardrobe, and just that it felt like it was just a very hard experience. Like, that's kind of what I remember. Okay. Do you remember sharing with her anything else regarding your experiences on set in that call? Okay. And then it cuts off. So we start the next one here. Okay. Right. Give me 1 sec. Sorry, I muted myself. Hey, Elsie, I'll send you a link on Instagram in 1 sec. That'd be a good idea, guys, because I gotta take a bathroom break too. So let me copy this to her. Okay. Oh my God. Sorry, every now and then I look at my social media and I look at the number of messages I have not answered, and I'm just like, wow, people must think I hate them. I really don't. I just can't manage all of it. Okay. There you go. Got it. All right, let's keep moving. Okay. So they're starting here with a new conversation. Again, it got cut off, of course. Did you have any personal role in making the decision to hire Melissa Nathan over any of the other crisis PRs that may have been recommended? No. Are you aware of where Jamie got the names for potential crisis communications professionals? I imagine from, and then Justin's lawyer Shapiro steps in and says, don't speculate. So Justin says, no, I actually don't. Okay. Do you know if he or anyone else at Wayfair asked Stephanie Jones for her views on crisis communications professionals that you should hire? Justin says, I don't. Do you know if she recommended Melissa or not? If Stephanie Jones recommended, I now know that she didn't. Okay. All right. How did you come to that understanding? And then the lawyer steps in. Mr. Baldoni, don't answer. All right, hang on. I can answer this. Stephanie had sent me a text about Melissa Nathan. Okay, we know that now. We know that Stephanie warned against hiring Melissa Nathan. We're not going to read too much into that. Are you aware they decided to hire her over the objections? We saw this page already, so I'm going to skip that. Okay. Do you understand from this text message that Stephanie is telling you and Jamie and Tara that it might not be good for you to be associated with someone like Melissa Nathan based on the type of tactics that she has used in the past? Justin says that seems to be an accurate summary, and that if people knew that you were associated with Melissa Nathan, or specifically if Blake's PR came to find out you had associated yourself with Melissa Nathan, they could use that against you because of who Melissa Nathan was, right? Justin says, I can't speculate to what she meant by that, but it seems to be she says Blake's PR to use as a weapon, so okay. Let's see the page numbers. Yeah, we're still going. Wayfair and you went ahead and hired Melissa Nathan. Okay, I believe so. Yeah. And there came a time in August after you hired Melissa Nathan, the Hollywood Reporter published an article about the fact that you hired her. So he looks at that article, right? And we know that this talks about Melissa Nathan, who represented Johnny Depp during the Amber Heard trial. And so they'll try to make it look like they compared Justin to Johnny Depp because Johnny Depp got quite a bit of criticism, right? So they're trying to equate the two. Even though Justin and Blake, in my opinion, don't have much in common with Johnny and Amber at all. That was a whole marriage that involved some crazy behavior on both parts. I didn't follow the trial as closely as a lot of other people did, but I know that she was not very truthful about a lot of stuff, and I know that he got a lot of flack for stuff that was later proven to not exactly be true. So they did try to compare him to Johnny in that regard, though. Basically saying because some people believe that Amber Heard was smeared, which I don't believe that. I think Amber Heard is kind of a piece of crap. But they did try to, equate Justin with Johnny in that regard, saying that they're smearing Blake Lively, I guess is how you would go about that. They didn't explicitly say that maybe, but it was implied. So, all right. Let's see. You were pretty upset when that article came out, right? He says, I don't remember what I was feeling. You were worried when this article came out that being publicly associated with Melissa Nathan might make it look like you had something to be guilty for. Justin says, no, I think I was just not happy that my crisis PR was being publicized. And we know why, because look at what that expert report said that we read recently. That it was standard practice, and that the expert said that it's, crisis PR should not be viewed by the public as some sort of crazy abnormal weapon, basically. Yeah. So, and if you haven't seen the expert report yet, I recommend reading it. At least read his conclusion, because it says a lot about this type of PR and how it's pretty standard. Okay. It's why were you not happy that your crisis PR was publicized? Because it felt like more of the kind of thing that felt like somebody would plant to draw more attention and fan a flame to something. The public speculation, the fan theories of why I wasn't doing press with anybody. What were the fan theories at the time about why you weren't doing press with anyone? Justin says, I remember there being a lot of talk about all the cast unfollowing me, why I wasn't doing press with any of the other cast members. I don't remember the date this came out, but I don't know if I had already done the premiere or not at this point. But I had also never read an article or seen an article about somebody hiring crisis PR, so I found it odd. I found that odd too, in retrospect, because I didn't know about it at the time. Because the only time I've ever read about somebody hiring crisis PR is Justin Baldoni's, thing with Melissa Nathan, and Blake Lively's crisis PR with the ex-CIA guy, Shapiro. So I've never heard about crisis PR teams being hired in the press like that before until now. So, okay. And you thought this made you look bad. He said, yeah, I think it did. And honestly, that was the goal, and it kind of succeeded, because the regular everyday people who kind of just follow the headlines of this case, they see that he hired a crisis PR team. They're not following along with everything. And they think that he did something to weaponize PR agencies against her in a way that normal celebrities don't do this. I think he's going farther, beyond what normal people would do to help their image during a PR crisis. So they made it sound worse than what it was. And of course, I would be upset too if I were in his shoes. So, okay. You thought it made you look like you had something to hide. He says, I think I had never been involved in anything like this, and I wasn't used to seeing my name in the press in this way. And I certainly didn't want my name out there in a negative way. Okay. You thought it made you look like you had something to hide that had to do with the allegations of onset abuse, right? Justin says, I'm unaware of any allegations of onset abuse. To this day, you're unaware of any allegations of onset abuse. Justin says, abuse? I'm aware of allegations as were written in the New York Times article and in this lawsuit. Ms. Shaw, the attorney, says, what do you understand those allegations to be? Justin says, I understand that I have been alleged to have sexually harassed Ms. Lively, and then that I have alleged to have launched a retaliation smear campaign. Do you recall articles coming out around this time that called your onset behavior abusive? Justin says, I believe I do. The attorney says, so you understand that was one of the fan theories that was floating around about why you weren't involved in publicity and why all the cast hadn't followed you, right? Okay. Justin says, not necessarily. Okay. Well, yes or no? He says, no. You're not aware of any fan theories at the time that one of the reasons the cast unfollowed you, something about abusive or toxic behavior on set. He says, I'm not aware those were fan theories. No. Any theories, she says. Justin says, I'm aware that there were leaks to press that accused me of that, but I'm not aware of fan theories. Okay. Got it. Nope, we're still going on the same pages. Okay. They're talking about a document. It's a text thread between Henny Grace, Melissa Nathan, you. I think that's it. So we learned here that if you didn't know this already, which we already figured out at this point, that Henny Grace used to be Justin Baldoni's alias, but now it's public, so it's no longer useful. Right. So they're talking about a text thread about the Hollywood Reporter article. Okay. One of the texts from Justin says, talk to me about this. I'm really frustrated about the Crisis PR leak and framing it as Johnny Depp's firm to poise that I have something to hide and also there was abuse. Okay. So you were concerned about the Hollywood Reporter article, framing it specifically with relation to Melissa Nathan's prior association with Johnny Depp, that it might mean you had something to hide and there was abuse on set. He says, yes, actually, yes. So like he's read it, now he recalls. Got it. And then you say, I don't understand how we're letting her continue to leak stories and do this to us. Do you see that? Yes. Who is her? I presume it meant Miss Lively's team. Got it. Okay. And then you ask Melissa Nathan to walk you through it. And then I want you to read Melissa Nathan's response on the next page. Okay, so he keeps reading. A PR should never be a part of a story, but I also work with many people who are in trouble and protect them. Do you see that? So that's something Melissa Nathan said. What is your understanding from this text message or any other conversation you had with her about this topic, that she was also frustrated by the publication of the THR article? He says, I'm reading that here now, so it appears she was frustrated. Okay. Do you remember her conveying to you that she was frustrated by it? He says, I don't remember outside of this. I was on a plane at the time, so we didn't speak. Do you recall any phone or in-person conversations about that article? He says, definitely not in person. I don't remember any phone calls. I feel like this was me venting. Okay. You're essentially asking her, tell me why this isn't a bad look for me. Okay. He says, I think I'm trying to understand all of this. I oftentimes reach out to my team to say, help me understand this. I have a feeling about something. I don't like this. Make me feel better about it. What does this mean? What is this? And I'm not a PR expert. So. Would you agree that she did try to make you feel better about it? He says, it appears she did. Okay. She's essentially saying this is not a huge deal. It doesn't look terrible for you. Justin says, yeah, saying it's very normal, but that people have crisis PR. But it seems to me that she also said it's not normal for PR to be part of a story. So normal for people to have a crisis PR, but not normal for it to be a headline that people have a crisis PR. Is kind of what we're dealing with here. Right. Okay. Jen knows I spoke for an hour on the phone from 12 to 1. She swears she had nothing to do with it. But I know someone placed this. Okay. Did you have a suspicion that Jen Abel placed this? Justin says, no. Do you have a suspicion that Stephanie Jones placed this? He says, I had a suspicion that this was Blake's team placing this. Okay. Right. Okay. She's essentially communicating to you, I'm frustrated by this. Someone placed this. It wasn't me. Justin says, I think maybe when I first reached out to her, I may have been confused and wondered why my team might place this, or if it was a leak. I don't really remember. I just remember it being such a weird headline. But no, I never suspected that Jen placed it. Did you ever suspect Melissa placed it? Not in a negative way. I think if I reached out, I was confirming that no one from my team would brag about me having crisis PR. I didn't think it was something worth bragging or making an announcement about. Okay. Did you get confirmation from your team or comfort from your team that no one from your team had leaked this information? He says, I believe I did. Okay. All right. So this is all just like talking about how Melissa Nathan was trying to comfort him, saying it doesn't make you look bad, but he was upset about it. She's saying all the reporters can trust me, which is why when they called me, they took out all the social media stuff and did a straight story as they wouldn't kill it. Okay. I feel like a lot of this is saying the same thing, so I don't want to read word for word on that. But okay. He says, sometimes my reading comprehension isn't great. So they asked if he's like understanding what he meant by they took out all the social media stuff. No, I have all the reporters like and trust me, which is why they called me. I have no idea what she's talking about. All right, got it. Is this the type of negative association with Melissa Nathan, her past clients and tactics that you think Steph was warning you about before she hired you? Or sorry, before you hired Melissa? I can't speculate to what she was worried or warning me about. Did Melissa Nathan ever tell you that she, in fact, was responsible for the leak that culminated in this story? Justin says she never did. Did she ever tell you she was lying to you when she told you that she was incredibly frustrated by this? She did not. Wait, so... And I have to question the authenticity here, okay, because it's Blake's attorney is saying this. Did Melissa Nathan ever tell you that she leaked this, basically? Did Melissa Nathan ever tell you she was the one that told people that she was your crisis PR team and put this in the press? Did she ever tell you when she said, I know someone placed this, that she actually knew someone had placed it? So far, I'm seeing like they're kind of insinuating that she did, but it doesn't necessarily say that she did, for sure. You know, right? They're kind of planting the seed there, but they're not necessarily saying it outright. Did she ever tell you it was one of her friends? Like before, she didn't tell me anything except what I see here. Okay. I'm going to show you, pull tab 40. Okay. Do you want me to hold on to this? Right. In a text thread between you, Melissa Nathan, and Jen Abel. Turn to page 4554. Okay, let's see. Make sure they didn't cut the page off there. Right. You're sending a screenshot to Jen and Melissa of a text that your old assistant Will sent to you. Okay. In that text, he's essentially expressing that it's a bad look what came out in the Hollywood Reporter story. Okay. Okay. And you were passing that along to Jen and Melissa. Right. Okay. Who's on this text, by the way? Oh, it's Melissa. Okay. I'm being talked about in public, and that sucks. And he's telling me that he thinks that it looks like I'm trying to cover something up. And he wants to just share with me because he knows my heart, and I didn't want people to think that because it wasn't true. And isn't this kind of association exactly what Stephanie Jones was warning you about when she advised you not to hire Melissa? What does that matter? Justin says, again, I don't know what Stephanie Jones was referring to, so I can't answer that. All right. Okay. Here's at least one independent source expressing that same view to you. Justin says yes. Okay. Were you bothered by this? Justin says, I think I was. All right. Can you think of another example of a director of a film hiring crisis PR during the promotion and release of the film related to the promotion and release of the film? Okay. One sec. I can't think of an article where anyone who hires crisis PR publicizes it. My question was, can you think of a single example of a director who hired crisis PR during the promotion and release of a film? He can't think of one. All right. Pretty unique situation in the industry as far as you're aware. He says, I'm sorry, what was the question? That a director would hire a crisis PR in connection with the promotion and release of a film. I don't know, because I don't think normally people find out when people hire crisis PR. Yeah, right. Okay. Make sure the pages are still going. Yep. Okay. Am I correct that you and Jen and Melissa were talking about, generally speaking, what is going on with publicity around you and the film and this issue and how to handle it? Justin says, I think there were more articles coming out that she was sharing and giving more context about, and here we're talking about the trainer and my back. That's from what I see. Okay. So he's talking about the truce here with Blake. This text reads, just woke up, texting Jennifer with all the texts I'm getting. I'm worried about me. I'm getting worried about me. So other people are worried about him and they're texting him. Justin says, I imagine this truce didn't last. So he's saying, people are texting me, they're worried about me, and I'm thinking that means Blake broke the truce. Okay. Do you recall getting texts that morning or the day before that were concerned about you? Justin says, I remember going to sleep. I don't remember where I was, but there were a lot of people asking if I was okay. All right. Because they had read the THR article. He says, I don't know what they were or what they had read. I don't know how many articles there were, but I know that people were worried about me. Okay. All right. One second. Sorry. So they're asking if it was his understanding that was at least in part because of the Hollywood Reporter article. He says, I had no idea what it was about. That's why I was texting Jennifer, and I make reference to a truce between the two PR teams. Okay. Got it. Okay. Okay. He's still talking about the truce. The tag team, incoming published stories. Okay. You understood that Melissa Nathan had reached out to Leslie Sloan, it's Blake's publicist, and formed some sort of truce. Is that right? He says, yes. Okay. I think I had believed that both her and Jen were doing that. So they were reaching out about a truce and handling any inquiries. Okay. Right. You understood Melissa Nathan was interfacing with reporters as necessary on any of these stories. My understanding was that if someone reached out to her, then she would obviously answer that or communicate with them in whatever way a PR person communicates. And by someone, you mean a reporter, right? And by she, you meant Melissa Nathan or Jennifer Abel. Okay. They're just asking a whole lot of stuff we know already and have talked about before. So I'm going to skim through some of this. Not sure if I ever thought about who I was speaking to. Okay. Can't imagine I would have been happy about that. Okay. Fair to say you would have been pretty pissed if you learned Melissa Nathan had, in fact, leaked the information that resulted in the article, right? Justin says, I can't imagine I would have been happy about that. Okay. All right. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 10. It's a text between Melissa, Ashley, and Amy Chosick dated August 13th. Okay. Justin has never seen this before. He says, I have to flip through it. Okay. They say, do you know who Amy and Ashley are? He doesn't. There's a text from Amy and there's a text from Melissa Nathan. It says, as read, I am on Zoom, but we need to pin Amy threw me to the wolves. And that these are consecutive pages, so I'm not really sure what they're trying to say here. Amy threw me to the wolves. Okay. On Zoom, but we need to pin Amy threw me to the wolves. Okay. Got it. Do you see that? And then Amy says, as read, I didn't know that Joshua would put it on the wires. Okay. And then Amy says, my money is on Melissa against the wolves anyway. And then Melissa says, stop sucking up. Then Amy says, I should be your publicist. Hire me. And Melissa says, done, $0 per year. Now, this thread is on the same day as the Hollywood Reporter article was published. Are you aware of whether or not they're talking about that article that named Melissa as your crisis PR? The lawyer objects, Ms. Shapiro objects, says he's never seen this before. Okay. Can you move to something he actually has knowledge of? No, I'm going to ask him the questions I'm going to ask him. Is it okay if I read the document? Oh, God. Okay, I've read it. Do you now understand that they were joking about the Hollywood Reporter article that identified Melissa as your crisis PR? Justin says it appears to be the case. Okay. Flip with me to the page marked 1222. Okay. You see where Amy says, I told our friend Josh that Melissa is a boss and has a cool client. Josh told his wife, who is a very prominent publicist. Sarah somehow told THR, and now they are doing a story on Mel. Okay. So this is how that got leaked, I guess, to the Hollywood Reporter, right? Do you understand how this is how the Hollywood Reporter got the story? It appears this is what Amy is saying, right? Flip to the page. You see a screenshot texted by Melissa of a conversation between her and Pam. You don't need to flip back to the article, but I'll represent to you that Pam is McClintock, who wrote the Hollywood Reporter story on Melissa. Okay. And you see that they're texting. Go to chat. Just checking in to see if I need to look out for this article, and if so, when. Pam says, was just texting you. Story is very fair and going soon. Melissa says, thank you. All right. Were you aware that Melissa had spoken on Background with the Hollywood Reporter ahead of the story being published? Justin says, I was not. Were you aware she was managing coverage in the Hollywood Reporter story about her before the story was being published? He says, I was not. Yikes. Yeah, that's something that she probably should have disclosed. Okay. Amy writes, perfect. Okay. If you flip the page, let's see. Yeah, so they're definitely talking about these text messages that they're showing us here. They're definitely talking about the Hollywood Reporter. Okay. Were you aware that Melissa and her friends were boasting and joking about how good this article was going to be for Melissa at the time? He says, I wasn't aware of this, so no. because Melissa never told you any of this, did she? Justin says, I think I testified to what Melissa told me earlier, which was not this. So, right. If you flip the page, you'll see Melissa text the Hollywood Reporter story to this group thread when it goes up. And then Ashley says, oh, that's really good. Like, really good. And then Amy says, boom, this is good. Okay. Amy lower below says, you're going to hear from all the problematic men. Dick Pick-a-Palooza. Oh, my God. Ashley says, men are always the problem. You're in the right game. Wow. Melissa Nathan sucks, dude. So she didn't care at all that this looked bad for Justin, which, let's be honest, it does. It looks bad that they're, connecting him to Johnny Depp because there's so much controversy around that case, and he didn't want that kind of attention. He wanted to keep the truce. And Melissa Nathan in these text messages is clearly in on this Hollywood Reporter article, which she told him she was upset about, as he was. So these text messages don't actually, say anything bad about Justin Baldoni at all, but they do make Melissa Nathan look pretty shitty. Because it's basically saying that Melissa Nathan thinks that her client is just like some shitty, problematic man, so she doesn't care about his feelings, and so she's just doing what's best for her business, which is putting her name out there as a publicist, a crisis PR person for problematic men. And so now she thinks she's going to get hired by a bunch of sleazebags. Wow. I've been not a huge fan of a lot of the publicists involved in this, especially Blake's. Mind that. With Jen Abel, I thought in the beginning I was pretty harsh on the whole thing because she, had all that stuff on her work device, and I was like not understanding me at the time, not understanding that was like a standard thing for PR people. I was very harsh. And I've come to realize that she was under a lot of stress and pressure that I didn't understand at the time. And so I've kind of like been, walked a lot of that back. I'm like, I think that maybe I was unfairly critical of her at the time. I didn't have all the information. I didn't really understand things. But as far as Melissa Nathan goes, I'm not a huge fan. I got to say. She would have to speak to them. They're reporting either way. Yes. But like if they reached out and they asked for a statement and asked for her to weigh in, like, yeah, she would have to weigh in, but she didn't have to lie to Justin about it and pretend she was frustrated and had no idea. And like that was coming out, and she didn't have to frame it in a way that was like so bad for him and so good for her. You know what I mean? Like it's very clear from these text messages that obviously came for her and her friends that she was hyped about the good this was going to do for her business. And I'm sorry, but in my personal opinion, people can disagree with me. That's fine. I think that she was pretty self-serving in this manner, and I think she didn't do the best job that she could for him. So that's just my thought. I'm not a big fan. Okay. So, like I said, I've been very judgy of the publicists in the past, so I try to be careful with that now. As I've come to learn more about their profession, how it works, and the kind of things that goes on a day-to-day basis. But dude, while I can make a lot of allowances for Jen Abel, and I understand that her situation is a lot more complex than I understood at first, and I don't have any, real bad things to say about her. When it comes to Melissa and what she did and how she's handling this, I'm not a fan. So that has nothing to do with Jen. It has nothing to do with Jen's PR agency. I'm just talking about the crisis PR people here, because yes, she's better than Stephanie Jones shoplifts. Yes, but I think that I'm not a fan. I just got to be honest about that. So, I was expecting Lauren to call her the C word. I'm trying to do better about that, so I'm not gonna do that right now. But yeah, I don't know, dude. I don't like that. But all right. What do you think of this? Seeing it now? I think it sounds like a group of female friends talking to each other about an article. That's what Justin says. Are you pleased to see that Melissa was joking with her friends about the article that was causing you consternation at the time? Justin says, I'm not pleased. I don't think that's the word, but the lawyer says, are you pleased by the fact that when you asked her to explain this article for you and what it meant, she didn't tell you any of this? So how they were just saying that Justin asks, the publicist, what does this mean? Blah, 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 because he didn't understand the PR game as much as obviously they do. And she didn't explain that part to him. She didn't explain that she had anything to do with it. She didn't disclose to him at any point that she was involved and kind of fielding questions about this article before it came out. So she lied. Like the story was always going to look bad for him because it was a thing that was, something to do with the Blake Lively suit, but she didn't have to lie to him and say that she didn't know about it or pretend that she didn't know what it meant or like what happened there. Like she didn't answer his question honestly. And that's pretty plain, All right. Okay, I wouldn't say I'm pleased. Are you pleased to be lumped in among Melissa's friends with a group of all the problematic men that need Melissa's help? He says, I would hope they weren't thinking I was one of the problematic men, but that she was going to hear from all the problematic men. Then it says, as read, dick pic a palooza. So whatever that means. And I think we know as an audience what that means. Like all the problematic men, the politicians or whatever who get caught sending dick pics and stuff like that. Like they need a crisis PR person. Yeah. Obviously we know what that means as readers here. Most of us would agree with that. Some people won't, but I do. Yikes. Wow. Okay. Do you understand from this essentially what they're saying is this is an article about how Melissa helped Johnny in his abuse trial against Amber and is now helping you in relation to the allegations by Blake. And so she's going to be hearing from all the problematic men. So I understand what that implies. They're and her attorneys here are, it's not much of a stretch from her actual text messages. And I'm saying she's wrong for saying that. I'm saying that she's in the wrong for saying that. I don't believe that Justin is on par with these men who send dick pics and stuff like that. I don't believe that. But I'm saying the lawyers here, this question, I read it the first time I read what they were getting at there. I was like, well, maybe she was just, like kind of doing defense and wasn't really trying to promote herself or anything like that. But I'm looking at these and I'm like, that's yikes. Wow. She really fucked up with that. And I understand that these were private text messages at the time and you don't expect them to be brought out in court the way that they are now. But dude, that's a bad look. All right. Okay. I believe one could infer that was what they were talking about. Do you see Melissa anywhere in this text thread saying, what are you talking about? Justin is not a problematic man. Not in the pages you gave me. So they're basically saying, and this is what I was worried about when we started reading this thread. Do you see anywhere Melissa saying, oh no, Justin's not like that? And basically, so she didn't stand up for him. They're going to be able to now come out and say, well, she obviously thinks that he belongs in that, lumped in with that group of men, which isn't necessarily true at all, but that's how they can make it look. So it's all about optics with this. It's all about how they can make it look and how they can try to make the message appear between the lines. And I don't necessarily think that she meant anything by it, but it is, unfortunately, she set it up. She set them up for that. She basically served it to them. So, yikes. All right. Not in the pages that you gave me. Instead, see that Ashley says, Blake Lively noting Melissa's name. Haha. Then Amy says, Joaquin Phoenix is calling. And then Melissa says, I fucking wish. Okay. Do you have a view from this text thread about whether or not Melissa thought the publication was going to be good for her business? Justin says, I can't guess on what Melissa was thinking or feeling at that time. Justin answered that question in the proper way, right? But my answer to that question would be like, yeah, she fucking did. Do you think it would have been fair for people to infer from the fact that you chose to hire Melissa Nathan that you were now one of a group of problematic men that she tended to work with? Damn it, dude. And ultimately, like, guys, I don't think this is going to go anywhere in court. I don't think this is going to mean anything in the court case, especially when it comes to like the sexual harassment stuff. Like, this doesn't fucking mean anything, right? It doesn't. There's so many holes you can poke in this, but I'm just saying, like, for press purposes, and that this deposition is public, and we know these portions are public for a reason, and Blake's are not for a reason. Like, these things being made public, it makes it look pretty bad to the lay person who's like not normally following this stuff, right? Because we know like the legacy media cherry picks these types of things for the headlines, and they'll say like, look, even Justin's publicist thought that he was problematic, and like that's not necessarily true, but they didn't do a good job of setting him up in to look well, to come off well in this conversation. So And like, I'm conflicted because of everything that I just said before about Melissa and how I feel like she handled this. But then also, how many of us feel like every single conversation we had about every person in our life would make them look good, whether we meant to or not? And then for those things to all of a sudden come out in court, it's like that's a very difficult, tricky, nuanced situation. So I don't want to like flood her with hate or anything like that. You know what I mean? I'm not a fan. Let's put it that way. Not a fan. But I don't hate her guts. I'm not going to call her a derogatory word. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to do that. So I don't think she earned that. I just think that she's not my favorite person. Let's put it that way. So, all right. Do you think it would be a fair inference for people to draw from the fact that you had hired Melissa, who had also worked with other problematic men? Justin says, I think that would be fair. I think in this case, yeah. So Justin is, oh God. Justin is unfortunately, he's being very honest here and saying, I think that would be a fair inference. Damn. Do you think you're a problematic man? He says, I don't. Not in any respect. He says, I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't. Do you think this is the type of association, looking back with hindsight, that Steph Jones was trying to warn you about when she warned you not to hire Melissa Nathan? Justin says, again, I don't know everything that was in Stephanie Jones' head, but I think that could be a fair thing to think. Okay. You said you felt at the time that Stephanie Jones had an agenda and warning you against Melissa Nathan. Do you remember that? I do. Seeing this in hindsight, do you still think she had an agenda, or do you think she was trying to protect your interest? Justin says, I can't know what she was truly doing. I just know that the feeling that and then it cuts off. So, guys, the thing is, both of these things can be true. Stephanie Jones having an agenda because she and Melissa Nathan don't like each other, that can be true. Oh, sorry, hang on. Yeah, so Stephanie Jones can have an agenda, and Melissa Nathan, can be not the best at representing him behind his back. Both can be true. I think that both, in my opinion, are true. I think both of those things are true. I think she didn't do a very good job representing him to others behind his back. I think that I would give a little bit of grace because we all say things to our friends in private that we wouldn't say in public. And anyone who says differently is not really telling the truth, in my opinion. But I also think Stephanie Jones absolutely had an agenda. I think that's why I was so annoyed with the publicist in this case. As far as Jen Abel goes, I feel differently at this point in time. My opinion on the other publicists involved has not changed. I'll put it that way. I mean, I may be a little less intense in those feelings. Like, I don't feel like I want to call them mean names or anything like that. But I think that, yikes, these are not people I would want to work with. Let's put it that way. So, where did Elsie go? She said she was restarting her computer. Something happened. I don't know. Anyways. Okay. Let's move on. Guys, look, I'm on track to take way less than 3 hours. So, okay, so I cut off the duplicated pages here so we can skim through some of that because we already read it. All right. So we talked about this flipping the narrative thing. And then I wanted to start here. It says, this idea that this female writing or female film and that what Ryan Reynolds was saying was essentially misogynistic, did that come from Steve? He says, I think I said here that my partner has asked about this, so I was passing that along. And I think we did read this part, so I'm going to skim through this stuff. I redlined a bunch of that. Let's see. So here it skips down to page 302. It says, can you describe that journey for me? And Justin's talking about, writing his books and all that. You want me to describe my whole book journey briefly? Is it possible? I'm happy to try. I just don't know what briefly is. Okay. I'm just trying to understand what was the idea behind the book and the podcast. Well, the book was really a self-exploration of looking at all the unconscious messages that I've taken on as a man, but more importantly, as a human in my life. All the mistakes I've made, the social constructs and kind of invisible scripts that I maybe have been living by that I wasn't even aware of, and putting them in a form that I was hopeful could help other men. And the podcast, I think, was, to answer your question, a way to have a conversation around those same topics that oftentimes were uncomfortable so that we could have something for men outside of the book. Did the book or the podcast deal with, and this is the question from the lawyer, did the book or the podcast deal with notions of toxic masculinity? Was that part of it? And this is what I keep trying to tell people, which is he's going to explain here. He says, I actually say in the book that I don't like to use the phrase toxic masculinity, so I'll answer your question no. But I think that would be more of a perception based on who was listening. So his book, his podcast and all that, he doesn't want to come at men in a way that's going to make them defensive. He doesn't want to call them toxic, you know what I mean? So he's not saying necessarily things about toxic masculinity. He's not focusing on the negative. He's saying this is how you can have like healthy masculinity. This is how you can have healthy relationships and communication, and make sure that you're very well versed in consent and what that means, and like all kinds of stuff that he does to try to promote men being a safer space for women, men being more equal with women in their relationships. So we don't focus on toxic masculinity the way that a lot of people do. And the only reason I know that is from listening to him explain it. Because I used to think that he was just like a cringy male feminist. I was like, he's just like a cringy stereotype male feminist. He is like anti, like male, whatever, because he's like trying to be super woke was my thought at the time. My opinion has changed a lot, obviously. I think that his message is very important, something that young men and boys need to hear. And honestly, people in general, a lot of the time. And he's coming at it in a way that makes people feel like they can be open to the message, because he's not saying you need to listen to me because you're toxic. You need to listen to me because you're wrong and you're bad. And like everything that you are is disgusting. You know what I mean? Like the way that so many people do when we try to convince each other that of each other's point of views and try to get people to be on the same page these days, we like kind of bully each other into it in the way that we insult each other. But he approaches things as far as like, and his focus is like this thing around masculinity, but he approaches things between the genders and sexes or whatever in a way that's very peaceful and acknowledges like, I know you're not coming from a bad place. Like you don't start out as bad because you're a man, because you're masculine. You don't start out as bad, but you can be better. You can be good for people. You don't have to, because otherwise, if you don't consciously think of these things, if you don't try, then you could fall into these patterns unknowingly and not intentionally of being somebody who ends up being kind of a toxic person. You know what I mean? So you need to come at people in a way that's a neutral approach. It's like, here's how we can be and promote, healthy men for the people in our lives, rather than saying everything we do is wrong. You need to fix this shit right now. You know what I mean? Because if you come at people in a way that automatically assumes they're bad, you're not going to be able to do much good. So that's my thought. All right. And that's just how I feel based on conversations I see in general between people of different political parties these days and all kinds of stuff. People of different religious backgrounds. It's just people attack first, and they try to, what we try to do, I feel like as a whole, as a society, is we see so much of each other trying to take the other person's guard down by insulting them and making them question themselves in a negative way, and then trying to kind of beat our perspectives into them with more insults and more like, do this or else, or you're a bad person, or you don't deserve grace, you don't deserve this or that. I feel like we approach things in a way that's very, it's obviously not violent, because I'm talking about words, not violence, right? Even though violence is a problem. Let's not pretend violence isn't a problem in our society, but like I'm talking about words and the way we talk to each other. It's very aggressive, I guess is the more word. We approach things in such an aggressive way where we feel like the only way to take down each other's defenses to try to get our messages across is to attack first and then try to reason, when it's really not the way to do things if you want to really accomplish something, because all of a sudden we're all in this fight or flight mode with each other all the time. And it's led to us having such a deeply divided country on almost every single important issue. So I look at his communication style and the way he approaches things, and I appreciate that, because that's how I like to do things as well. So I don't know. I appreciate it. So, okay. Anyways. I actually say in the book, I don't like to use the phrase toxic masculinity. Let's see. I think the phrase toxic masculinity is inherently divisive. Oh, okay. So we're kind of getting into what I was talking about here. I believe it became political, and a lot of men felt attacked by the use of the word. I didn't feel that it made any sense to use a term that would immediately make men defensive. especially because those were the very men that I wanted to reach. And I also don't believe that masculinity is inherently toxic. I never have. I was very proud to be a man. I never felt like I needed to apologize for being a man. And I know that was something that was going around a lot with the phrase toxic masculinity. And that said, there were a lot of people that maybe kind of lumped in this idea that because I was doing a podcast and writing a book about masculinity, that I was saying that masculinity was toxic. But generally, those were people that didn't read my book or listen to the podcast. Like I'm saying, if you want to understand his message and where he comes from and who he actually is, you have to listen to him. We can't shortcut everything in 140 character tweets. Sometimes you actually have to listen to people and care enough to think about what they have to say to get to know them. So, all right. I just wanted to help men and help men embrace all the parts of them that made them human. And that also means the stuff that sucks and that you never want to look at. And then maybe you've been hiding or you don't even realize you're hiding. And it was just about confronting those parts of ourselves and just holding ourselves accountable to try to be better men. I'm sorry, that wasn't very brief. Oh. Hey, Bushbirds, what's going on? Miss you guys. I saw their video today. They've been missing for a little bit, so it's good to see you guys again. All right. Let's see. It's all right. And you'll forgive me if I'm using the wrong terminology around this stuff, but feel free to use whatever you think are the appropriate words. Right. Yeah. When you said the stuff that sucks that you never want to look at, or maybe you've been hiding or you don't even realize you've been hiding, can you give me some examples of what kind of stuff you're talking about? Okay, hang on. Hang on. All right. Okay. Sorry, Elsie was trying to get her computer to work. She's having some problems with it. She also has a lab at 11. So when I finish up here, because we don't have too much longer to go, when I finish up here, I might join them. We'll see. All right. Okay. I mean, a lot of men deal with shame. A lot of men deal, suicide among men is increasing yearly, and more people take their own lives than women. More men, take their lives than women. And there is a belief in, and I don't say this as an expert, this is just from my own research and experience. There's a belief in this specific world that this happens because men don't have a support system, because men have taught not to share their pain and their trauma, because it's oftentimes used against them and weaponized against them by both men and women. So an example could be a man that was abused as a child who never spoke to anybody about it. In this case, I'll give you an example of a man that was maybe abused by an older man, but this man identifies as heterosexual. But because he was abused by an older man, struggles with the abuse itself and being taken advantage of. But also the fact that he was abused by a man, he's questioning his sexuality or his gender. And also there's a perceived notion that as a man, you don't want to go to therapy because it makes you less of a man. So perhaps this man didn't get the help he needed and he was suffering in silence. And he didn't know who to reach out to. And instead, that man took all of these feelings of shame and unworthiness and confusion about what happened to him and blamed himself and would take that out on other people. Maybe other men, maybe other women, maybe this man himself became an abuser. And the whole idea is that this is something that as a man you would find embarrassing and shameful because it's not something it's socially accepted or acceptable to talk about. Okay. So the hope was to normalize getting the help you need to normalize vulnerability. Let men know that they're not alone and that there's all kinds of examples of these types of things. I'm happy to name another one if you want me to. And again, this is just a hypothetical, man. And many of these men end up eventually taking their own lives, and that breaks my heart, and hurting women in the process, which also breaks my heart. So, dude, this is the guy they're trying to label some sort of crazy, like weird sexual harasser and abuser. Like, dude. It hurts my heart that they're trying to crucify this guy because some, in my opinion, entitled bitch who does not need hundreds of more millions of dollars for what she went through, you know what I mean? Which was essentially petty squabbles, as they've said, which it does not amount to sexual harassment at all whatsoever. Like, it breaks my heart that she's trying to break this kind of man. Like, people take advantage of this kind of man. It's unfortunate because there are people out there who are trying their best to kind of equalize and pacify these relationships between men and women when things are, unfortunately, oftentimes so they turn aggressive. It's unfortunate, but it happens. And this guy's working really hard to try to change the narrative, to turn people's stories around, to try to reach people in a way that's going to change their lives and change the lives of the people who love them. And this is the person they're trying to go after. This is the person they're trying to hurt. Yeah. And another thing that's so sad is like seeing the way that some people talk about him, because they don't read this stuff. They don't read these perspectives, and they just assume that he's a cringy male feminist like I did so long ago. Or B, they think this guy has to be fake because nobody really thinks like that. And the truth is, there are people out here that think like that. There are people who want to do good in this world, and we're so skeptical of that right out of the bat. We're so skeptical of that right away because we're like, nobody's like that. We're so used to people acting in a way that's toxic and hurtful to each other that we can't believe it. Like we refuse to believe it, because if you believe it and it ends up being fake, it hurts even more, right? So just, I don't know. This whole thing just kind of, it hurts. It hurts the soul a little, you know? But we all do the best we can, I guess. And all I can do is sit here and say, I believe Justin and who he is sincere and genuine. I know from people that know him and love him and have worked with him that he is a genuine good man, and I support him in every way. So that's all I can do. Lots of hateful comments about that throughout the time I've spent covering this case, but at the end of the day, those things don't really matter, because if you really believe in something and believe and that somebody is doing good, and you believe it's the right thing, and you're trying to help people, then I think it's important to stand up for that, you know? So, all right. Did any of your work on the podcast or in this book around this idea of man enough have to do with gender norms or gender relations as between men and women? Justin says, I think the entire book was inherently about gender and masculinity specifically, but as I said in the book, I'm not an expert, and the book was much more my personal journey and trying to use as many anecdotes and stories that I could find in my life to point men to a direction of maybe them being able to look at themselves. I'm sure some of that was discussed earlier on the podcast or in the book as it's like this large conversation. And my book was meant to be just a tiny little piece of a personal journey meant for mostly for men. But as we know, many women read it and then gave it to their men. The lawyer asked, have you seen reporting around you that it identifies you as an ally of women or a feminist ally? I'm getting ahead of myself. Oh, I had to slow down. I would say so, yeah. Do you believe yourself to be an ally of women or a feminist ally? Justin says, I certainly have attempted to be. You're aware of the Me Too movement, I'm assuming. I am. Are you aware of an idea that came out of the Me Too movement that one should believe women when they speak out about misconduct against them? Yes, I'm aware. Do you agree with that idea? And they cut it off. So, all right. So here is a different conversation on a different page. It says, I don't know which magazine it was, and we're talking about it. Okay. After the TED talk you gave, Justin says, yes, at TED Women. Do you recall being asked the question prompting that answer? Did you ever feel like you were harassed or victimized on set? And so here's where we're going to start talking about Justin's history with being sexually harassed, his history with being abused in his prior relationship, and Blake's attorneys who just made this big fuss about anyone asking about her history during her deposition, which we don't even know what they said because they hide it all behind ceilings. And it's going to be quite a while, unfortunately, before the public actually gets to see that information, if at all, if the judge doesn't rule in her favor for sealing that stuff. I'm not even talking about her whole deposition. I'm talking about exhibits, right? And she wants to hide all of it. So, they made this huge fuss about that. And who knows what they even asked. But her lawyers are emboldened and enabled to ask these kinds of questions to Justin, which I think is gross. But let's take a look at what they said here. Okay. Did you ever feel like you were harassed or victimized on set? Justin says, I don't remember that. Okay, but as you sit here today, this is the first example you have brought up in response to my question of whether you've ever been sexually harassed. Justin says, that's the first response. I think you've asked me if I've talked about it publicly. Okay, so not if you've been harassed, but talked about it publicly. Why did you feel harassed by what this producer did? So a producer of Justin's at one point did something that made him feel he was sexually harassed. He says, well, he was asking me to get naked in the hot tub with him and standing very close to me with his naked genitals, like intentionally walking close to my face. It was just him and I in there, and he was using the idea that, and then they cut it off. But basically they made him recount this whole time where he feels like he was sexually harassed, and that is actual sexual harassment, asking him to get naked and standing close with his naked genitals. Asking about like a birthing scene, like if she would watch a post-birth video, is not. especially if she agreed to it. Saying an outfit that when she was concerned about her wardrobe looking sexy, saying an outfit looks sexy is not sexual harassment. Acting in a romantic scene, and writing in romance scenes in a book about sex and love and all this stuff is not harassment. This is harassment, okay? But they don't have a problem exploiting that and using that against them, okay? All right. So he didn't assault you. I wouldn't call it assault. I don't believe I characterize it as assault. I didn't say you did, sir. Okay. You were bigger and stronger than this guy, right? Really? I would imagine I was. This wasn't someone the size of Dwayne Johnson or The Rock or something like that. Justin says it was not. So if it had come to it, you probably could have knocked the guy out. Really? Do we ask women, like when they say they've been sexually harassed or assaulted, do we ask them, do you think you could have just punched the guy out? I'm not much of a fighter. I would have left. And of course, this is Mike Gottlieb asking the questions now. You didn't work for the guy, right? He says, no. So you had no employment relationship with him? No, I didn't. So I guess this must be some producer that he knew but didn't work for. But okay. Do you know who he was? I think he told me his name, but did you try to find him after the incident and talk to him about it? No. Did you find him before you talked about this event in Glamour magazine? No. Okay. And I think I know where they're going with this, but let me finish the page. You didn't want to give him an opportunity to take accountability and make it right? Justin says, I didn't name him. But you described him and described who he was friends with and the spa you were in. Justin says, I don't know if I described who his friends were. Do you know his name as you sit here today? Justin says, no. I think you've already talked about your experience with your college girlfriend. Is that right? And we'll stop right there so I can comment on something for a second. But this about him talking about this event where he was sexually harassed in Glamour magazine. Justin talking about that in Glamour magazine is not the same as suing someone for hundreds of millions of dollars for a workplace dispute without giving that employer an opportunity to take note of the situation, take the complaint, and correct that behavior. There's a difference between somebody saying I was uncomfortable with something or something happened to me that I didn't like, or you could even call this sexual harassment, but it would be different than somebody going to court and winning a case for workplace sexual harassment, right? And especially if Justin and that producer had a relationship where they reciprocated back and forth about these things. And then Justin one day decided to call it sexual harassment. That would be a different scenario, right? So like if they were on the same wavelength, talking to each other about these things and like both exposing themselves to each other, and then all of a sudden Justin was like, I'm not comfortable with this, the appropriate thing to do at that time would probably be to communicate with, hey, I understand we've had this relationship in the past. We've had this kind of communication in the past, but I'm not comfortable with it. I would like it to stop. You can't just show somebody that you want to be exposing each other and be very close and all this stuff and like have that kind of relationship with them. And then all of a sudden one day decide it's harassment because you don't like it. You have to communicate that then. If that person out of nowhere says, here are my genitals, take a look at them, that's harassment because you clearly didn't have any sort of established like relationship with them. You were not okay with it. You didn't consent to that. Okay. And then that would be harassment in my opinion. Would you be able to sue over that and win a lawsuit? No. But in my opinion, in the colloquial meaning of harassment, that would qualify as harassment. Yes. Because nobody wants a near stranger who they've never had an intimate relationship with to come up and be like, here's my penis. You know what I mean? So I don't need to make any more jokes about circumcision. I'm tired of that. But, that's not what happened with Blake and Justin. So there's, if you're involved with someone in any way, whether it be on a friendship level or an intimate level, a more intimate level, like you have an established relationship with that person and you show them that you are okay with a certain level of, let's call it friendliness. And then you all of a sudden decide you don't like that anymore because you're mad at them or you don't like them for some reason. Like you have to communicate that. You can't suddenly be like, whoa, foul. You know what I mean? Because you've been fine with it this entire time. You need to communicate with that person. Hey, I don't like this. Please don't do this. Okay. But that doesn't mean if you have an experience with a stranger who all of a sudden comes out and shows his genitals to you in your face and like you didn't approve of that you can't then later talk about your experience, right? if you're talking about stuff that happens on set, like if you're talking about the culture of sexual harassment on sets, and that's something that happened to you with a producer who you like didn't really know, he doesn't even know the guy's name, and he still came up and did that to you, like that's a very different story. It's not like he sued this guy for sexual harassment in the workplace, right? It's a very different scenario. So they're trying to say with the girlfriend and with this guy, basically, you didn't think that you had to tell them before you came out and told your story. The telling the story is not so much the issue here as the lawsuit, right? So you can come out and tell your story no matter what you want to do. I mean, we have all had people who say stuff about us that's not true. You can come out and say whatever the fuck you want, to be honest. And most of the time you can't get sued for defamation because the bar for defamation is super fucking high, right? So you have to just tell people your side of the story and hope they believe you. To be honest, it's shitty, but that's the truth. And you can't though go and sue somebody, right, for like hundreds of millions of dollars because you didn't like what they said or what they did. That's just not a thing. So I don't know. Maybe I lost my train of thought there, but I do my best. So yeah, it's just the problem here is the lawsuits, and they're going to try to distract from that. They're going to try to make it like you shouldn't have said this or that, basically, without talking to them first, because you're saying that Blake should have, done this or that, or filed a complaint first, right? They're saying you said that Blake should have filed a complaint first, and she didn't, so now she can't complain about it. That's not exactly what he's saying. Like, nobody's saying she didn't have the right to tell her story to the New York Times. They're saying he should have had the right to respond in an appropriate manner. They should have given him more time and more attention to his side of the story, but they aren't exactly ethical as a publication, in my opinion. But yeah, it's like the problem is that she's suing him for hundreds of millions of dollars. She can tell her side of the story, and he can reciprocate by telling his side of the story. But she sues him for hundreds of millions of dollars and tries to muzzle him on all fronts. That's a bit different. So they're trying to make false equivalencies here, and I don't appreciate it, is basically what I'm saying. In a really long, roundabout way. Okay. All right. So I think you've already talked about your experience with your college girlfriend. Is that right? Yes. And then it skips a little bit here, so I don't know exactly what was said, so it skips off. Do you ever go back to talk to any of your college friends or people that you might have hung out with mutually to tell them that you were what you were going to do? I don't know anybody from back then. So, okay. Do you have any idea whether or not your college girlfriend would agree with the way you have remembered the events relating to the losing of your virginity? And that's, guys, that's 20 plus years ago. 20 plus years ago, right? Again, another false equivalency. I don't know what she would think. I don't know who she is anymore. Right, because we've all changed in the last 20 fucking years. I've changed in a year, right? But you thought it was okay to go on TV and tell the world that your college girlfriend had sexually abused you without ever talking to her about it, which is ridiculous. So they're trying to say that he, as a survivor of abuse, did something wrong. He, as a survivor of sexual abuse, actual sexual abuse, did something wrong by saying that. Good one. I wasn't aware I needed to ask her permission to share my story. And the thing is, him telling his account of what happened with his college girlfriend is not the same as using her name, going to a publication to tell a one-sided story, using his fame and connections and money to tell a one-sided story with a very high-profile publication in this country. And her not getting a chance to really defend herself. That is not the fucking same. We don't know who she is. I have no interest in digging up who she is. He just wanted to tell his story and his experience, and he didn't throw her under the bus, right? Okay. I wasn't aware I needed to ask her permission to share my story. Am I right that one of the things that was most traumatic about this to you is that you, and then it cuts off, of course, but the thing is, like, they're fine asking him about these deeply traumatic personal things involving his own sexual abuse, like when somebody sexually abused him and using that against him. But then they come out to People magazine and the press over the weekend and say, well, Justin's lawyers dug into Blake's sexual past when we don't know. They could have asked her, they could have asked Blake, have you ever, had any unscripted kissing on other sets in the past? And they could characterize that as, like her sexual history in the past or something, because that's the kind of thing her lawyers do. So it's just bullshit to me. All right. And then I redlined out a lot of this because it was repeated pages from the top. Let's see. Okay. I'm most interested in what you said publicly about how, in your view, being exposed to pornography repetitively affects one's view of consent. Do you recall giving a talk called Boys Will Be Human, a talk on healthy masculinity with Justin Baldoni? And he wrote a book to that effect as well. I haven't read that one, but because I don't have any boys, you know what I mean? So I'm not really don't have too much in that to read about, but I understand it's supposed to be about teaching boys about consent, young boys about consent. So I mean, I have nephews, but I'm not teaching them about consent. You know what I mean? I'm not their parents. So it just didn't seem like a read that I wanted to, or that was, something I needed to read at this point in my life, but maybe someday I will. We'll see. All right. This is during an interview, and I want to read what you said. You said, he's quoting Justin here. When you hit 11 or 12 years old and your friends have a phone and maybe you don't, and you're being shown things for the first time, and then you start to think that is what women want. And in porn, as we know, no means yes or try harder. It starts to become very confusing, which is definitely something that happened to me. So he's talking about this, and it's a real problem for young boys, especially in this new age of devices everywhere and social media all over the place, where porn is so accessible. Even on Twitter, look at Twitter. It's gotten better than it has, but I'm seeing weird spam bot porn accounts everywhere. You can barely escape nasty random porn stuff on the internet these days, and kids are getting exposed more and more to the internet at a younger age. Social media is becoming more and more of a kind of staple of life to communicate with people these days. It's who's not online? Not very many people. So he's talking about this relationship between young boys and the internet and porn, and how most of us as adults, we know that porn shows situations where a woman might say no, and the man would continue to press for sex, and she would give in. And porn portrays that in a manner that it's acceptable. And so it's showing young boys who are being exposed to this for the first time that you shouldn't take no for an answer. You should continue to push. And even as we as a society become more and more aware of these things and that it's not okay, if you're still seeing it online from such a young age, it's going to be confusing, because you already hear different things from your friends than you hear from your mom and dad, right? So if your parents try to teach you about consent, but you're seeing online constantly that no means yes, that can be a really confusing thing for a prepubescent boy or a teenage boy, a high school boy, even a 19 to 25-year-old boy. It's ridiculous. And so he's just trying to show this can be very confusing, and we need to talk about this. And they're again trying to use these kinds of things against him. So, all right, that was page 77. So it skips ahead here. So he's saying, what I'm essentially saying is there's even a possibility that in my teens and 20s, I wasn't aware. So he's saying when he was growing up, that was an issue. And so he's saying even in his teens and 20s, he wasn't aware because he was so exposed to pornography. He was I wasn't aware that, consent looked differently in real life than it did in these videos that I keep seeing, and that my friends keep showing me, and that all these people keep talking about. It's ridiculous. Dude, I'm not, let's be real. I'm like I said, a grown woman. I'm in my 30s. I've seen porn. Okay. I'm not going to pretend I haven't seen porn. That shit is not real life a lot of the time, most of the time. I mean, if anyone ever did that to me, I'd be don't talk to me like that. I'm a fucking human being. You know what I mean? There's weird stuff on the internet, or just even regular kind of vanilla, very basic stuff. If you're a dude looking at porn, it's you're going to see stuff where it's the way they talk to women and slap them around, and the things that they do and they say, and the way they don't take no for an answer, and that the woman in the porn will act turned on. That's not real life, dude. So if I was, I can't imagine being a young boy and seeing that and being what the hell? Because I'm hearing from all these people over here that this is the wrong thing to do, but then I'm seeing in practice, because that's what it is, when you're seeing actual sex online, I'm seeing guys who are actually having sex showing me that this is what people want. So that could be very confusing, So yeah, a teenager or an early 20s young man could be very confused by that. And I think pretending that that's not an issue is unhelpful, to be honest. And I think pretending that anyone who's ever been confused by that is unhelpful. I think it's unrealistic. I think it's, you know, I'm never going to be somebody who is okay with like sexual assault or anything like that. But I'm saying if you're somebody who's like in your youth, you didn't really understand boundaries to the point where you maybe, you know, asked one too many times when you shouldn't have, or something like that. When you asked, when you should have taken no for an answer the first time, like, I'm not going to condemn you to a life or like go to hell. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be like, you're a terrible person, you're a shitty person for the rest of your life. Like, everybody should know that sexual assault is too far, but there are lines, you know what I mean? Like, there are lines where we can do better. And a lot of that does come down to the informed consent type of stuff, where it's like, if somebody says no, you need to take no for an answer the first time. And if you continue to ask, like, maybe you don't need to be condemned for it for the rest of your life, but you do need to stop and realize, like, no, you can't continue to cross these lines. You can't continue to push these boundaries when people say no. So, you know, hopefully people understand what I mean. Like, like I said, I'm never going to be okay with people actually physically harming anyone or harassing anyone in that way when they've been told to stop. But if you are somebody who's younger and has been very confused in this new age of the internet and everything going on, and you're confused by what you're being told and what you're seeing, telling you conflicting messages, I understand that. Like, I think that we should do better to educate people and to make sure that it doesn't continue to happen in the future. I think people can be redeemed in that way. Like, you don't have to, you know, like, suffer for the rest of your life and think you're a terrible person just because you had a porn addiction, or because you know, took something that happened in porn and you were like, I thought that's what you wanted in real life. And that turns out that's not really what women want. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't know. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully people understand that what I'm saying is, like, I want to promote informed consent, and I support informed consent and education around that, versus, like, I don't want to shame everyone who's ever like watched porn and been like, oh shit, I'm sorry, I like crossed the line there. Like, I shouldn't have asked you to do that when you said no. I shouldn't have asked you to do that when you said I'm not really into it. You know what I mean? I shouldn't have asked, basically, because some people will, like, unfortunately see porn and think no means ask again. No means try harder. You know what I mean? So, like, and they'll ask again when they shouldn't. And I think that it's okay to tell people, like, you can still do better. You can still, if you stop pushing that boundary and you take no for an answer and you stop asking, it's going to be okay. You can still do better. So, yeah. I don't know. Like I said, I'm never going to be okay with assault or anything like that. I think that's a step too far. And I think that's a hard, I don't know if you can come back from that or not. That's a conversation from another time. Personally, yikes. That's a hard one for me. I don't think that's something I can really discuss online. But when it comes to just like talking and trying over and over again when you were already told no, like, don't do that. You know what I mean? So, yeah. I just want to be very clear that I don't support any sort of like assault or anything like that. Anyways, let's see. Okay. Literally what you said is, I'm sure I crossed boundaries and lines in my teens and 20s, not even thinking about it, is simply because of the porn I was consuming. Okay. So that's what you said. And my question to you is, do I understand your testimony to be that you were essentially making that up in order to make other men feel that you were relatable to them? What? Justin says, no, I'm sure I've crossed boundaries in my teens and 20s. I'm sure I have. Okay. And do you think that was because of the exposure that you had to this kind of toxic pornography? He says, I'm sure that was part of it. It was also a different time, and part of why I wrote the book was that consent wasn't taught to boys, and I wanted to make sure that we taught consent to boys and men. Okay, and so that, again, is like kind of what I was trying to say. There's a difference between kind of like crossing boundaries socially to where you might, a girl turns you down and you repeatedly try to like get with her or whatever, and that's something that I think you can kind of come back from if you learn that it's not okay to cross those kinds of boundaries. I think it's okay if you learn that that's not okay, and like that's something that you can kind of redeem yourself from, because that's way different than actually like assaulting someone or like doing something to someone. You know what I mean? Like having problems with boundaries socially and because of, you know, your pornography exposure and being a person who assaults women are very different things. So I think that having the boundary problem and having that recognized as something that can be fixed and something that can be redeemed can play a part in stopping people from going beyond just crossing the social boundaries to the point where they might become violent, where they might become abusive. And so if we stop treating people like these kind of like minor things where, like, say like a guy asks a girl out and she says no, and then he continues to ask her out and she keeps saying no and she feels uncomfortable because he won't take no for an answer. Like, if we treat those like things that can be fixed or corrected, and like you can still have normal relationships in your life if you learn to do better and move forward, I think that's going to go a long way in stopping people from crossing worse lines later on, if that makes sense. So, like I said, hopefully I'm just, I don't ever want to make it sound like I condone like rape, you know what I mean? Like, I don't condone that, you know what I mean? But I'm saying, like, when it comes to lesser boundaries, like social boundaries, like where you're making someone uncomfortable, you can fix that, right? You can fix that. You can stop that. You can nip that in the bud. You can go to therapy, talk about why you're doing that, why you think it's okay, how the kind of exposure to the pornography made you feel, and how it maybe made you feel like you should continue to pursue things when you were told no. You can talk about that and you can work through that and you can do better, right? So I don't want to push people to a point of no return where they feel like the only thing they can do is worse, if that makes sense. So, all right. So, lots of us have given in, so a man will shut the fuck up and quit asking. Oh, I know. I've done that. Not in a long time. Granted, it's been like closer to 15 years now, but, I think a lot of us have been there. So, okay. Anyways. All right. So it skips ahead here and it says, you hugged Miss Lively on multiple occasions, right? And then Justin says, they ask how many times he would estimate that he hugged Miss Lively. He says, on the set, not outside of the set. So Justin says, and it's confusing here because he's like not understanding the question. He's like, what do you mean the hugs? Are they on the set, or like what do you mean every day? Like, so he says, are these hugs I initiated, or are these hugs that I was a recipient of? He says, the lawyer says, you can characterize it however you'd like. Justin says, I want to be as accurate as possible as it relates to the hugging. That was my question. You can include hugs you believe you initiated and hugs you believe Miss Lively initiated. He says, like, lump them all together. So maybe a greeting and an exit. So the most maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know. And that's the answer anyone should give, because who fucking remembers how many hugs you gave? My God. All right. Let's see. Fair enough. And when you don't know, that's what I always want your answer to be. Okay, cool. Do you know who Vivian Baker is? That's Miss Lively's makeup artist. Gottlieb says she testified under oath. Do you know she testified? And are you aware she testified there was a culture of hugging? Justin says, I am now. Are you aware she said that made a number of people uncomfortable? Justin says, I find that odd. Gottlieb, the lawyer, says, you find that odd? Why? Justin says, because Miss Baker was often the one that would run up and give me a hug. So like she would run up and give him a hug, but Miss Baker testified, I guess, that there was a culture of hugging. So the thing is, when she said the thing about the culture of hugging, we don't necessarily know that was in a negative context. So they could have asked her, like, because Blake testified to a culture of hugging, they could have said, Miss Baker, would you agree that there was like a culture of hugging? Or would you agree that did you ever see Justin hugging people, or the Wayfarer parties hugging people? Do you think there was a culture of hugging? Like, they could have asked those questions and she could have said yes. So we don't have much information about that. And then Gottlieb says, because of that, you find it odd that she testified that a number of people felt uncomfortable with the culture of hugging. He says, correct. Justin says it's correct. I find that odd, right? He says, correct. Gottlieb says, do you remember earlier when you testified about the hot tub? Justin says, you're referring to what? Sexually harassed? When you were sexually harassed in the hot tub. So they're talking again about that thing where the guy was pushing his genitalia close to Justin and like asked him to get naked and stuff. They're comparing a hug between friends to that, a hug that the other person initiated. It cuts off here, so we don't know exactly what else was said, but They're from context clues again. They're going to try to say basically that, like, did you tell the man that you felt uncomfortable, right? And so they're going to try to say that because she didn't tell him that she was uncomfortable hugging, that doesn't mean that she wasn't. But like the thing is, if she initiates the hug and she felt uncomfortable, who is that really on? That's not really Justin's fault, in my opinion. But and we're talking about Miss Baker here, so we can't see her whole deposition. We only know these bits and pieces. And like I said, they could have framed it in a way that had her answer to it in a way that benefits their story, but they didn't necessarily ask it in a way that was going to get the whole truth of the matter. So, okay. All right. Anyways, I redlined out this stuff because we already saw it in the beginning. Okay. Did you want Miss Lively to perform the birth scene without most of her clothes on? Justin says no. Did you ever tell Miss Lively your wife had ripped her clothes off during childbirth? Justin says, I do not recall a conversation where I said my wife ripped her clothes off during childbirth. Mr. Gottlieb says, do you recall ever sharing any information with Miss Lively in speaking about the birth scene in the movie where you recounted information about your wife giving birth to Miss Lively? Justin says, I remember numerous conversations where Miss Lively and I were talking about our, and I don't mean my birth, but our like collective births, where she shared personal information, and then I shared personal information about my wife. So Blake shared personal information about what happened when she was popping out her kids. And so Justin shared information about, like, anecdotes about their births of their children, because they're talking about fucking birthing scene. It's not a hard concept, right? Okay. Mr. Gottlieb says, as you sit here today, you can't recall any conversation in which the topic included the amount of clothing or the type of clothing that Miss Lively's character ought to wear during the birthing scene. Justin says, I don't remember anything specific about clothing. That was definitely not what we were talking about in terms of all the conversations around the births. By Mr. Gottlieb, did you ever ask Mr. Heath to share any portion of a video of his wife giving birth with Miss Lively? Justin says, I did. Did you specify when you asked Mr. Heath to share that video what he should share from it or how much he should share from it? Justin says, the only video I'm aware of is after his birth, so after the birth of the child, so I believe there's only one that I asked him to share. Okay. And then this last page here is again cut off, so we're seeing the beginning of a different conversation. It says, in their circle, Hugh Jackman, Sean Levy, Taylor Swift. So you must be talking about Miss Lively's kind of powerful friends. By that point, as I testified earlier, I was essentially forced or threatened to step down off my film. I wasn't able to finish my own film, even considering it tested higher. So his cut of the film tested higher multiple times among audiences, test audiences, and her cut still, got picked. Somehow the actress of my movie, who was not a producer, was able to take complete control of the film. By this point, Miss Lively had requested that my name be removed, so I had my film by credit removed. I was removed from the majority of marketing materials, from the poster. I was being removed, for the most part, from the trailer. I know that she had been working with Taylor Swift to make sure that she got the song that she wanted to film, and I had assumed that was not a battle or a fight that I could ever win. All of the cast had unfollowed me, which is a very public thing to do right before a movie comes out, all in unison. And at that time, I was being threatened via my agency that if I didn't release a statement, then the gloves would come off. Now, I didn't know the exact sequence of the time in which I sent that text, but I will tell, and then it cuts off. So we know that the agency thing, so Ryan Reynolds did tell the agency, the agent, that, Justin Baldoni was a predator. And basically, it sounds like, and I can't prove it, but there might be documents to this effect, so people in the chat might have to let us know. But basically, Ryan Reynolds did say that, he's a predator and he wanted them to get rid of him. And Ari Emanuel, who was heading WME at the time, went on a podcast, and stupidly, they tried to wipe this from the internet, but somebody who was in the audience had a clip. Stupidly, he admitted that because of Blake and Ryan, that's why he fired Justin. Yikes. Okay. So they said that to his agency, demanded he get fired. So he got fired from his agency. So they can prove that. There are recordings to that effect. So, all right. So the agency basically said, make this statement or else. And then he wouldn't make the statement. Justin's wife didn't want him to make the statement. They wanted to fight it. So, and then the agency fired him. So they let him go. So I don't know if fired is the right word, because I don't know how these relationships really work, but they stopped working with him. So, all right. Okay. So that's all the pages I had for you guys tonight. Luckily, this was only 2 hours and not 3, but I'm going to see maybe what else he's doing. And yeah, I'll try to go join them. Let me actually redirect you guys over there so I can, if I can redirect, I'll be over there in a minute. I'll take a quick break, like 10 minutes or so. Oh my God. Sorry, I'm trying to find the right one. No, I can't find Elsie's on here. I don't know why. That's weird. All right. Well, let me send you over my friend Megan for now. I will, if I can, I might have to have Elsie turn on her redirects for next time. I'll switch. Yeah, there it is. All right, why don't I send you over here then? I'll just put it in chat, guys. One second. All right, so I'm going to pop the link right here. Go to this link if you want to watch, and I'll be over there in like 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to end this now. Thanks, guys, if you did follow and watch on Twitch. I appreciate that. Like I said, I'm going to be using that for backup from now on. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'll have something out for you. And then tomorrow night, we'll probably stream again. So, all right. Hang on. Let me make sure I got... Oh, Megan just sent people to me. Oh, dude, but I'm ending now. That's funny. I was just about to send people to Megan. Yeah, I gotta send people. Thank you, Megan. I gotta send people to Elsie though. That's really funny. Like, that's really funny timing. I'll text you. We're live now. Yeah, I got you. Elsie, can you turn your redirect privileges on your YouTube channel? But yeah. All right, I'm gonna send everyone over to. I'm really glad I didn't end and send people to Megan. No, I love Megan. I haven't been able to stream with her in a bit, but we'll do that soon, hopefully. I took a little break from the Laura Owen stuff, so I'll probably try to get back on that next week or something. We'll see. What can I do here? Yeah, I know. I was about to send people to you, dude. What can I do here? Let me see what I can do here. All right, if you want to watch Jeopardy with Elsie, I'll be over there in a minute. Go to this link that I just... Yeah, I bought you and Elsie are on the same stream. I don't know if it'll let me redirect to her. Hang on. Yeah, none of these people have their redirect privileges turned on, so which is a problem. So that's why I can't send people over there. But who will I send people to? Let's see. Camelot. We'll go with Ian. I'll send you to Ian. So if you don't want to watch Jeopardy, you can go to Ian. If you do want to watch Jeopardy, you can go to the link I put in the chat there. So, all right, I'm going to take off now. Thanks, everyone who came from Megan. Sorry I couldn't stick around, but thanks for coming by. All right, bye.